Hey friends, it's Alex, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be looking back on my reading year for 2022, see how I did with my goals, got some stats, just generally looking at the reading year that's just gone. It was not my best reading year, I know that already. Well, I mean, I've seen all the stats so I know that anyway, but I knew throughout the year that it wasn't my best reading year. I had like a period of 2 months where I didn't read a single book. I've sort of, since COVID hit, I've been like a bit slumpy with my reading. And then last year, that period of 2 months was where it got to its worst. And then I myself got COVID and had to spend a lot of time just by myself in my room, and so I read loads of books in that time, and that sort of has helped kick me back into it, I think, which is good. And since then my reading has got better and getting back into it and getting more in the mood, I'm feeling more motivated. But yeah, last year was where my kind of slumpy feelings kind of hit their peak, and so there were 2 months that were not good. So I'll go through my 2022 reading and like stats and stuff. I'm not going to go through every book I've read, but just stats about my reading. I use kind of two things to track it. I use Goodreads, and then last year I used a spreadsheet made by Reader Voracious. I will leave a link in the description to the 2023 one. However, I'm not using that in 2023, but I'll tell you more about that in my 2023 goals video, which will hopefully be a week after this video. So in 2022 I set my reading goal to 75 books. I used to set it to like 100 every year and I would meet that, but I haven't been the last couple of years, so last year I set it to 75 and I read 62, so I didn't make it to 75 even. But like I said, I had 2 months where I didn't finish a single book, so it's kind of to be expected. According to Goodreads and the page counts that are listed for the editions I marked as read on Goodreads, I read 22,289 pages, which I don't know if that's a lot. Okay, so apparently that kind of averages out to 360 pages per book, which is probably about the standard average that I read. For 2023, for this year, like I said, I'm using a different, I'm not using the Reader Voracious spreadsheet, I'm using something else, and I'm going to be tracking the pages read throughout the year myself based on the page count in the book that I'm holding, and I'm going to count it stopped at where the story stops, because some books count the acknowledgements and stuff, so it should be a slightly more accurate page count for this year, but I think that one is probably fairly close anyway. So the Reader Voracious spreadsheet includes like tables of the data you've put in, so I will, where they're relevant, I'll put them up here so you can see a visual representation. So yeah, I read 62 books throughout the year, and I'm going to move my laptop to my lap so I don't have to keep looking over here. I'm going to keep looking down here instead. So the spreadsheet tracks how many books you've read each month. It counts them up monthly, which I'll put the table for that here. So in January I read 7 books, February was 4, March was 4, April was 6. May and June were the 2 months where I didn't read anything, so those are both 0. I think I read a little bit but I didn't finish anything. And then July I got COVID right at the start of the month, and that set me up for a really good reading month, and I read 11 books. That was my best reading month of the year. August I read 8, September I read 7, October I read 6, November I read 3, and December I read 6. Not the best reading I've ever done, but I'm not like upset about it. It's fine, I still read things. I'm glad I got back into reading more in the second half of the year and back into like the amount I like to read, I guess. So in terms of what I rated the books I read, table here again, I rated 3 books 2 stars, 18 books 3 stars, 32 books 4 stars, and 9 books 5 stars. And I do know a lot of those 5 stars were actually rereads. I didn't really have a very good reading year in terms of finding new favourites. But yeah, that was my rating distribution. I'm constantly trying to utilise the 3-star rating more. There are so many books that I rate 4 stars that I could probably rate 3 stars, and this year I feel like I've done that a bit more. but basically I use it the way Goodreads does. So for me, a 3-star means I liked it, and then a 4-star means I really liked it. And I rate a lot of books 4 stars that probably really could have been 3 stars. Like, I did like them, but not as much as some other books, I guess. And then according to Goodreads, my average rating for the year was 3.7 stars, which, yeah, probably sounds about right. So in terms of genres, I read one classic, although the one I've listed as a classic, I don't really know if it counts as a classic because it's a retelling of a classic, but I didn't really know what else to count it as. I read 22 fantasy, 7 graphic novels, 9 contemporaries, 4 historical fictions, 3 horror, 5 mystery, 3 sci-fi, 5 thriller, sorry, and 3 other. So as I expected, my most read genre was fantasy. That is my favourite genre, so I was expecting that one to be my most read. And then my second most read was contemporary, which again, I am growing more and more out of contemporary as each year goes, but I'm still not surprised that was my second most read. I think in previous years, the fantasy and contemporary have been a lot more even, so this year is really the first year that I can see my reading shifting a lot more to fantasy. But again, that doesn't really surprise me because that's just what I'm always in the mood for. I'll mention format of what, like the format I read each book in, even though I didn't really record it accurately, and it was only halfway through the year that I was like, oh, I should have done this better, and didn't. So I recorded it as 30 hardcover and 32 paperbacks, but some of those really should have been listed as audiobook, and I didn't, because I tend to listen to the audiobooks of books I already own. And so then when I was listening to the audiobook, I was marking the format as the edition that I own, as opposed to the fact that I listened to it on audiobook. So I did listen to a lot of audiobooks and I just didn't mark them down. So that's something I'm doing this year. If I've listened to a book on audiobook, even if I've like read along, because I do sometimes do that where I listen to an audiobook but read along in the physical book at the same time, I'm still going to count that as an audiobook so I can actually get a number of how many audiobooks I've listened to in the year. So in terms of age range of the books read, I read 24 adult books, 30 YA books and 8 middle grade books. Again, that seems fairly what I was expecting. Same with my taste shifting more towards fantasy, it's also shifting more towards adult. So the adult number is creeping up from previous years and the YA number is creeping down. YA is still quite high though because I have a book buying problem. I buy more books than I can read, so my unread shelves are still a lot of YA. So I will still be reading a lot of YA. They're books that I am interested in still. I got them because I was interested in them. I'm still interested in them, so I'm not going to just get rid of them without reading them. So therefore, my age range number is my YA number is still probably going to be quite high, maybe even for a few years. But generally my shifts are moving more just towards like adult fantasy, some adult contemporary. I still like YA thrillers, that is one YA thing I like. But yeah, mostly shifting more towards adult and definitely more towards fantasy. I might just also mention when the books I read were published. Again, this one doesn't... The way this spreadsheet was set up to track it didn't track it in a way that I would have if I'd done it myself. So it counts it as a new book if it was released in 2022 or a backlist if it was released before that. But then if a book is a reread, it doesn't fall into those first two categories, it falls under reread and it doesn't count when it was published. So according to this spreadsheet I read 7 new published books and 55 backlist. I guess my 6 reread are most likely to be backlist as well. So again, that's something I was generally expecting to see. I tend to more read backlist books. I buy new releases as they come out that I'm interested in and then they go on my shelves and I don't read them for a few years, so I tend to mostly read backlist books, so I was expecting that number as well. So that was most of my stats from my spreadsheet. I do like having these stats. I like using the spreadsheets to track things that Goodreads doesn't track, and you can kind of tailor it more to yourself, I guess. Even if you're using a template one, if you've got a bit of an understanding of sheets, you can edit it a bit to make it tailored to you. So in terms of my 2022 goals that I set at the start of the year, I didn't do amazingly, but it's fine. So in terms of the ones I succeeded on, we'll start with a positive. I wanted to reduce the amount of unread books I owned, either by, you know, reading them and not buying as many unread books, or by unhauling ones I'm no longer interested in. I did actually do that. I believe it was, yeah, 315 at the start of 2022, and I've just counted them up now and it is now at 277, so it has gone down. Not a huge amount, but it has gone down, and so that's all I'm focusing on. The other goal I'm counting it as succeeded in, was that I wanted to get back into blogging. I didn't really do that until October, I think it was. I just completely started a new blog, started from fresh, but I have actually been sticking with it. I've been posting sort of regularly, been trying to get myself into a routine and onto a schedule, and I am sort of slowly getting back into blogging, so I've done that one, which I'm very happy with. Also, the link to my blog will be in the description if you wanted to check it out and give it a follow. So I wanted to read more books than I bought. That was more of a monthly goal when I set it, although that also obviously equates out to yearly, and I failed. I didn't even record all the books that I bought on my spreadsheet, because during the middle of the year where I just went full on slump, I just stopped even using my spreadsheet or recording anything, and it's still more books bought than read, so I really failed that, but I still reduced my TBR. I just got rid of a load of books I'm no longer interested in, really. I also wanted to read every day. The fact that I didn't finish a single book for 2 months suggests that I definitely failed that goal. I know I failed that goal. Even when I was actually more active in reading and finishing books in the month, I was not reading every day. I also wanted to post a YouTube video once a week, which I did not do. Again, I've barely posted on YouTube last year. I want to try and get more regular this year again, but I just have to see how it goes. Got a lot on this year, and part of the reason why I'm not posting regularly is because I entered into a relationship. I don't know how to word that. I started seeing someone. I got a boyfriend in May, and I spent a lot of time around his house, and it's much harder to film booktube videos when you're not with all your books. So that is part of the reason why. But hopefully that issue will be resolved this year, we'll see. And then I had sort of 3 goals about specific books to read. So I wanted to read all of the Jane Austen books that I haven't yet read. Going into 2022, I'd already read 2 of her books, and I had the 4 other novels and then the Sanditon collection, whatever that is, left to read. I did not read any of them. I've not furthered my Jane Austen reading at all, so that is a massive fail. I also wanted to read Jane Eyre. That was kind of another classic that I wanted to prioritise, partly just because I'm interested, partly because it's Beth's favourite book. I did not read that either. I failed again. And then I had like a list of just 21 books that I wanted to read. It wasn't really any like theme to it. It wasn't the longest books, the oldest books on my TBR or anything like that. It was just 21 random books I wanted to read. I read 6 of them, which is better than nothing, but I was hoping to read more. There were 2 series on that list that I have had for years, and they were very intentionally on there. And that was the 7 Realms series by Cindy Williams Chimer and the Remnant Chronicles by Mary E. Pearson. Both of those ones, because I have owned them for so long and not read them yet, not even started them, both of them I was saying if I haven't read them in 2022 I will unhaul them. I have already unhauled the 7 Realms series, I think that's what it's called anyway, and I still have the Remnant Chronicles on my shelves, but I am going to stick to that and I am going to unhaul them because I just keep forgetting about them. And even throughout 2022, when I was like, they were on my priority list to read, I kept forgetting about them. And the Remnant Chronicles do still sound interesting, especially the first book, but I'm just not getting around to it, and so I'm just gonna get rid of them. Just gonna do it. And then I also sort of had a vague goal. I don't think I put it in my goals video for 2022, but it was just a vague goal of trying to finish some of the series I was in the middle of. I don't think I did very well with that. I think I literally only managed to catch up on one, which was the Curse So Dark and Curse So Dark and oh my god, what the fuck fuck is that book called? 1 second. A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I finished that series. I'd read the first book and I finally finished the series, which I'm very happy about. But I do have other series that I'm still in the middle of that I would really like to finally finish. And I wanted to get to them in 2022 and I just didn't. So yeah, those were my 2022 goals and how I did on them, and my 2022 reading stats. Yeah, it wasn't my best reading year, but it's okay. It's just, I read for fun, so I'm not going to force myself to read when I'm not in the mood to, because that wouldn't be fun. Oh, that was, just wanted to mention one other thing, because I didn't really have the best reading in terms of finding new favourites. I only had 3 books that I rated 5 stars that weren't rereads, so instead of doing a separate best books of 2022 video, I'm just going to mention them here now. So I have The Cat Who Saved Books by Suzuki Natsukawa. This was just really, really lovely, and it was about cats and books, and I enjoyed the story, and it was just nice. I had a really nice time reading this. I read it a very long time ago. It was like right at the beginning of the year, so I don't really remember a lot, but I do remember really enjoying it and getting really into it. The second one was A Conjuring of Light by V. Schwab. This is the 3rd book in a trilogy. It's the Shades of London trilogy, I think. Beth and I buddy read the whole series this year, and this one got 5 stars from me. I did really, really love this series. I think it's possibly my favourite series by V.E. Schwab, just because it's more fantasy and that's more my thing. But yeah, this was very good. And then my number 1 favourite book of 2022, I have very strong feelings about this one, is The No-Show by Beth O'Leary. Partly I just really love Beth O'Leary. I've read all of her books. I love them all so much. They are so... they all have a sort of depth to them that I'm not always expecting, like a sort of darker topic, which is what I like from my contemporaries now, slightly more hard-hitting. I'm not really that into just cute fluffy romances anymore. So partly just generally in love for Beth O'Leary, and then partly with this one specifically, it was shaping up to be not my favourite Beth O'Leary book. This is my favourite Beth O'Leary book as well, not just my favourite of the year. It wasn't necessarily looking like it was going to go that way throughout most of the book. I was really enjoying it, but it wasn't necessarily shaping up to be my favourite. And then a certain reveal towards the end, yeah, that was that happened, and it really brought this right up to my favourite Beth O'Leary book, my favourite book of the year. I mean, it was partly just, you know, interesting to read, but partly also quite personal in the end, which really made it hit a lot harder. I was like sobbing while finishing this book. So yeah, I wasn't expecting it to go the way it went, and then the way it went also ended up being quite personal, and so that made it just, that was just a double whammy of this book is amazing for me personally. So yeah, new favourite Beth O'Leary book, favourite book of 2022. So yeah, that is my 2022 reading wrap up, my goals wrap up, my reading stats, all that fun stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Keep an eye out hopefully next week for my 2023 goals video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!